Welcome, everybody. Hello. My name is Mark Dancigers, and I'm the director of New Music New College. And this is our artist conversation for our upcoming concert, which is happening tomorrow at 5 p.m. right here out in the Caples Arcade behind Sainer Auditorium at the New College of Florida. Our concert is called Workers Union, music of Louis Andriessen and Nick Bärtsch. And we are so excited that we're able to talk with you today about this music. So thank you all for coming. We have a very small in-person audience, and we're so happy you're here. And I know we have a few folks as well joining us online on the live stream. So welcome to those of you who are joining us virtually. So we're playing a couple of really interesting pieces on this concert. And what we like to do at our artist conversations is talk a little bit about the music by way of eliciting some response from the audience or from you, those of you who are here in attendance. And our goal is to give you a sense of what some of the sounds are that you'll hear on Saturday, and then begin to kind of create a dialogue about what your reaction is to the music. And so we're going to be doing that here in just a moment. So I'll be playing a bit, and we'll have our excellent producer and keyboardist, Ron Silver, as well, to play for you. Before we do that, I want to tell you just a very little bit about what you'll hear, not to sort of give it away too much, but just for a little bit of context. The first piece on the program that's happening tomorrow is called Workers Union. It's written by a composer named Louis Andriessen, and it's from 1975. Andriessen wrote this piece for his own ensemble. It was a kind of a group that he got together for the purpose of playing his music, a number of different pieces, not just this piece, Workers Union. And the ensemble was called Die Voorharding. And there was a kind of a spirit, I think, that Andriessen put into the formation of that group that was interested in exploring the new. And so there's something that's very consonant about us kind of getting together, a group of musicians to play this music, and what Andriessen sort of initially intended when he created these pieces, including Workers Union. So I'll say that on Saturday you'll hear a good number more musicians than you see on the stage right now. This is a small, reduced version of our ensemble, but on Saturday we're going to have a really amazing group of players together to perform for you. And another reason why this concert is special to us is that that particular ensemble that you'll hear tomorrow is comprised of New College of Florida students, as well as some fabulous musicians from around the Sarasota area. So we have Ash Hoffman on cello, Lee on flute. Those are our two New College students who you'll get to hear, as well as Dr. Peter Carney, a wonderful saxophonist from the State College of Florida, John Miller, principal bass of the Sarasota Orchestra, Rachel Halverson, principal viola of the Sarasota Orchestra, and Aaron Nix, a really tremendous drum set player. So it's quite a loud and lively group, and that's, I think, part of what is intended in the music. So Workers Union has a subtitle, and the subtitle is Symphonic Movement for any loud-sounding group of instruments. So typically we think of a symphonic movement as, well, probably orchestral, right? Living in an orchestral genre or world. And any loud sounding group of instruments, well, what could that be? That's quite open-ended, right? Typically, when we think of what a composer does, one of the first things that a composer might do is specify what instrument they're writing for, how the score might be laid out, how the different parts might be divided up into different types of roles within the composition and so on. Workers' Union is a score that is not put together in this way. It's put together in an entirely different kind of spirit. And so before I say anything more about that, maybe it makes sense for us to play it a little bit and then get your reactions to it, and then kind of build a conversation about the piece that starts from there. So this is as loud a sounding group of instruments as we have right now. It'll be louder tomorrow, playing just the opening page of this piece called Workers' Union. Oh, should we wait? Do you want to wait? Oh, do we? Oh, we know she is. Okay. Okay. Well, I tell you what. Yeah. Sure. Well, so okay. Well, we have a student en route to join us to play. So we're going to give them just a couple more minutes so that we might get an even louder sounding group of instruments for you. So this is among the innovations that we're exploring here in our unusual times. But what? Yeah. Let me talk just briefly about the way that our concerts are structured and kind of where New Music New College fits within what happens here at New College while we're waiting for hopefully Ash Hoffman to join us here. So New Music New College is a series that has been running for over 20 years here in Sarasota, and we're dedicated to new and adventurous music that lives somewhere possibly in the concert music tradition. In other words, music that's scored or improvised and relies on players with all kinds of different backgrounds, possibly classical, but possibly other different types of experiences. We've really enjoyed the opportunity to bring this programming to Sarasota. We have 5 concerts per year, typically. This is an unusual year. We have a couple of web series that we ran in the fall that are still available on newmusicnewcollege.org. And then we have a couple of concerts that we've programmed live in the spring, including this one. And we have also Vicky Chow, extraordinary pianist, performing for us on April 24th. So that's our spring season. The pieces that we do, or the concerts that we do that are focused on the work that we do here at New College and New College of Florida students. In other words, the concerts that we do that involve our campus in a very active way, are programmed in a way so that we take advantage of the music students' interests and their ideas and their creativity that they're able to bring to what we do. We have a music program that is quite broad and exploratory, and music students come here for the study of music production, to develop their own voice, some to study instrumentally, some to be musicologists and critical thinkers about music. And so we have a really broad range of interests within the student body. We've done many, many pieces that are open in a way that is somewhat similar to Workers' Union. So I will go back to Workers' Union because this might relate to some experiences that you have had if you've heard some of our other concerts. So a number of years ago, New Music New College programmed a piece called In C by Terry Reilly. And that's a piece from 1964, I believe. And that concert's called Inside NC, and I think it's still available on our website. And it actually took place right here. We had musicians all lined around these four walls, and the audience sat inside, hence Inside NC. So this piece by Terry Reilly is another score that any instrumentalist could join, right? So I was mentioning that Workers Union has this open instrumentation concept. It doesn't matter what you play. If you play an instrument, if you have a voice, if you play drums, you can get into this score, join the group, and sort of create a collective experience. Well, Andriessen was well aware of Terry Reilly's earlier piece in C. And one of the things that's a little bit fascinating about that is that Terry Reilly is a composer who was based in California at the time that he wrote that piece. And very much, I think, that piece has something to do with the environment that it came from. California in the 60s, a sense of sort of collective coming together to make music in a way that was very different than other types of ensemble sort of orientations. And that concept didn't often travel in a way that we can kind of notice from the US overseas to Europe. There was not a ton of a sense of sort of this idea of West Coast 1960s American exploratory music that then kind of migrated over and had a big influence on composers working in Europe. And Andriessen was really aware of this stuff going on. And so one of the cool things about Workers Union is that it has this kind of connection to musical activity that was going on in the US. And in particular, this kind of focus on how music ensembles are constituted. What's the experience like for a player in the ensemble? There's this really wonderful quote from an early program note that Andriessen wrote about Workers Union, and one of the things that he talked about was that as a composer, you can ask yourself, well, who is the first audience for your music? Who are the first people who get to hear it? And interestingly, often that's players, right? Musicians, people who will sit down and take the time to get out their instrument, or maybe the piece is actually conceived for a specific group of players. So players are a really important audience for composers, and then Andriessen sort of pulls that out in an early program note. And so, as a composer, the idea of focusing on what that experience is like for a player, and also who could be a player for a given score, right? In other words, to whom is the invitation extended to come together and form an ensemble to play this piece? Those kinds of questions were I think, part of the inspiration behind how this score came together. So now we're very pleased that we have our wonderful cellist, Ash Hoffman, joining us. So we're gonna play the opening of Workers Union for you, and then we can continue the conversation about it. Thanks again for joining us. Bear with us for just a moment, I think, while Ash gets set up here. So that's the opening of Workers' Union. And so we're curious, for those of you who are with us here, what did you hear? How did any of that music strike you? And I'm gonna get up and come out into the lawn to you. So what were your reactions to that sound? Anyone? Really, anything? Sorry? So the comment was that it sounds very forceful. Great. So something that you would do if you were working. Yeah, so evocative of the title. Great. Anything else? Yeah. So there's a mechanicalness to it, and the sounds themselves are a bit edgy. Yes, and so the comment is that the title evokes doing something together, and also playing in unison, which is definitely the predominant mode of how the music unfolds in a certain way. So, so this is great because between these two comments, you picked out a couple of things that are early indications in the score. One of the set of score instructions says that the sound of the whole group should often be aggressive. And so if that forcefulness is coming out, that's good, at least as far as we know from the score. Then the idea of unison, so this piece, I think, works with the idea of unison in a very particular way. And I wonder if we could bring in Ash to describe this a little bit. Like, so what's your experience of this particular flavor of unison stuff?
Yeah, so normally I'm not used to playing in unison. Normally I'm used to playing in the symphony or by myself. And so it's a really unique feeling. And the fact that it's all very dissonant because none of them are actual pointed notes makes it very different. But in a way, it's kind of freeing a little bit, something different to do. It's nice having kind of a little bit of artistic freedom almost with what kind of sounds you want to add to the group, even though it is unison. And I think that that kind of variation makes the unison interesting.
Yeah, so Ash mentioned something that you might not know unless you know the score, but you may have picked up on orally, which is that the piece is notated in a unison, but only in a specific way. And so that specific way is the rhythms are all unison, except for a couple of parts where sometimes there's a bit of divergence here and there. But the vast majority of the playing is in rhythmic unison. In other words, everyone's articulating at the same time. And there's also what we could call directional unison. In other words, the lines of rhythm, the lines of written rhythm, they go up in register and they go down in register, and they kind of stick around a medium area, and then they wander around. So there's a kind of a gestural shape to the rhythms. But the actual pitches themselves are completely up to the player. Yeah. Oh yeah. So the comment is that it's a kind of a jazz conception in some ways, and that's a really interesting comment too, because in Andriessen's language, I think that his sense of harmony is informed by listening to jazz, and he's talked about that and written about it. But you're right too to pick up on the fact that it's baked into this piece in a very particular way. And so, yeah, the idea of like, well, you, the player, choose your pitches. So long as you go up when you're supposed to go up, so long as you go down when you're supposed to go down, so long as you play the exact right rhythm. So in a certain way, it's a really precise piece. It's actually quite demanding on the ensemble. It's a challenge to play. In certain ways, it's a challenge to listen to because it's a very, as you mentioned, a kind of an aggressive, forceful piece. But the player has total freedom over what exact note they happen to hit. And so the result of that is endless sort of dissonant harmonic clusters that just kind of move around in this very gestural way. And so getting back to the idea of unison, yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So the comment was that, in a sense, there's this kind of an impression of unison, but there's also a very strong impression of dissonance. And it's easy, I think you mentioned, for the different instrumental sounds to kind of get lost in one another. You're not exactly sure who's playing what. That impression that you have of it may be heightened when it's 8 people tomorrow. And I think that's a part of the of the charm of the piece, is that it does become a kind of a big unit, like a machine or something like that. Yeah. Right. So yeah. So the comment is that there's no foreground or background necessarily, and your ear is not drawn at a certain time to a certain instrument for a melodic line, or you're not aware of, say, a certain group of instruments playing in the background and creating a palette for others. It's more, kind of a unified field. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what that experience is like for you. That kind of feeling of it all being very upfront. Yeah. 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 So the comment is that, how is this for the musicians? Because depending on how your ear wants to go, you might find it really disorienting to have just any old pitch around you at any time. Do you adjust? Do you not adjust? What's that experience like? Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Either of you want to take a stab at that, Ash or Ron?
For me, I sometimes, in my head, I have a little, somewhat of a method for it. Sometimes I try to pick like a key for myself to like stay in, and then add a little bit of accidentals whenever I like, it just kind of happens because it's moving so fast and you kind of have to like think on your toes. It's that kind of feeling. But it is like a really difficult thing, like stylistically, especially like, because it's like, it's so dissonant, but it's like jazzy in a way, in a really interesting way, and it's so hard to try and like become accustomed to that style in like a way that works. And so I feel like I just kind of like mess around with different like keys or styles. Sometimes I change keys like depending on like how I feel like a certain bar is like going, or I just decide to change keys from bar to bar or something. But yeah, did you?
I have my own. Ooh, let me put it up. I have my own microphone, so I don't have to infect yours. for me as a synthesizer player, it's in certain ways it's much easier because I don't have to use my ear to tune. I mean, I hit a certain plastic thing and it's going to play whatever pitch that plastic thing is. So it's, for me, it's the choices of where I put my fingers and what's under them. And as I work on this piece, the thing is it moves so quickly. It's really challenging. And the rhythms, he varies the rhythms slightly. He'll vary the accents slightly. So and it goes at such a quick pace that it's, for me, very challenging to try to do accurately. And then to try to, not just, it's not hard to go up when he says go up and go down when he says go down, but there's a center line and that's supposed to be the center pitch. And sometimes I find myself going up and I look down, I'm like, oh, I really should be much closer to the center. Damn, I'm really in the wrong part of the keyboard. But it's fun. It's really fun to do with other people, and I've done it a number of times, including earlier today, just with Mark. And the real funny thing is, every once in a while, we will hit a unison. We'll both choose the same pitch, and we'll be sitting on this one pitch together, and I know that both of us are thinking, no, we shouldn't be in unison. So one of us has to change. So there are some parts of this where I've made conscious choices for fingering purposes or something. I'll be like, I know I want to hit this particular pitch, but most of the time I'm kind of improvising as I go with my pitch choices.
Yeah, so the question is, do you feel liberated doing that?
Oh, for me, absolutely. I feel liberated. It's a wonderful piece. It's a terrific piece, I think, to perform. I have more fun with it, the more comfortable with it I am. Something that we talk about a lot over the years at New Music, New College, the choice, freedom, and responsibility. This piece has tons of both. So you have lots of freedom to choose the pitches, although not ultimate freedom. You can't go down when it says up. You'd be doing it wrong. But you have the responsibility to play the rhythms, and the rhythms with everyone else. So getting back to the union concept, one of the great things about this piece is, when there are 8 of us playing it, we're all equally responsible for making this piece happen. It's not like there's a conductor, or it's not like the drummer's going to keep the beat and I can just, improvise around. No, we are all doing it, and we're all reliant on ourselves. So it's just great, and it's very liberating in that respect.
Yeah, it's such a great comment because one of the things that Andriessen writes in the score along these lines is only if each player plays such that their part is an essential one does the piece succeed. And when you first approach the music, that isn't necessarily an intuitive idea, because when you open it up and you do see that there's this tremendous degree of freedom to choose pitches, so long as you play the gestures, you do kind of have this sense of like, oh well, wow, I can kind of play along with it in a sense, but that doesn't tend to be what happens. What happens again as you kind of develop a relationship with it is that everyone sort of generates it together in real time, and so it kind of foregrounds that that way in which the music can only come into being really in that moment, and it heightens your sense of that as a player, which I think is a really a kind of a beautiful thing. And then, sort of talking about the question of freedom, I think Ron said it really nicely. I mean, the piece does give you a sort of a very difficult and challenging freedom, which again is like it's like, wow, that's a rather complex notion to but I think as musicians we do feel that not just in pieces like this. I mean, I think that lots of music has that embedded in it. But again, there's something that's foregrounded about it here. That challenge of, well, there's this part of this that's open and there's this part of this that just has to be absolutely together. Yeah, well, these are great comments. Any other just ideas, responses about the music? One is something that I'll mention just because it's something that I enjoy about it. You mentioned that the forcefulness of it is sort of foregrounded. And this also, I guess, is something that's sort of not obvious, but it is worth pointing out. So when I first encountered this piece, I was like, oh, perfect. This is heavy metal. Because I'm a guitarist, and that makes sense to me, and the rhythms are really sort of driving and pounding and visceral and all of that. And it's really about these gestures. You know, you truly can forget what pitch you're playing. You play the shapes and the lines and the movement and the feeling of it. But also, you know, just kind of the total openness of the instrumentation is also something that's really, I think, a piece of that. You know, we have synthesizer, cello, electric guitar. We'll have drums and viola and bass and flute and sax. Yeah, and so, you know, there's not a ton of contemporary music, say, that's scored for electric guitar. There's some. And if you want to know more about that, I'm happy to tell you more about that one day. It's one of my pet interests. But it's really amazing to have pieces like this where, you know, as somebody who, you know, is a synth player, is a kazoo player, you know, you can kind of show up and be like, yeah, I can contribute to this just as much as any other player. And that's a really, really awesome thing. So I think there's something that's kind of, while it's very rigorous and challenging, it also has this kind of beautiful accessibility to it, just because of that conception of it, which is so open. So maybe what we could do is just like play a little bit more music, and just to give like a hint about what else is on the program. So we're also playing some music by a wonderful composer named Nick Bärtsch. And Nick Bärtsch has a band called Ronin. And I was fortunate to get to hear them a number of years ago, and then again recently. So I've heard them a couple of times and have gotten to correspond with Nick. He wrote a beautiful piece for a group that I play in called Now Ensemble. And he was kind enough to send me some of his scores to his music. So we're playing one of his pieces following the Andriessen on Saturday night. And the piece is called Module 22. Many of his compositions are called modules, and they, I think they are aptly named because they develop in these sort of blocks of material in very beautifully interesting ways. And when you hear this music, your first thought might be, well, like, what do these pieces have in common with each other? How are they living together on the same program? So we have the same ensemble playing both pieces. The thing that I guess I would point out before we play just a little bit of it is that there's a similar sense of rhythmic drive. So you might kind of find that kind of similar focus on rhythm. There's a kind of a world of repetition that is built up over sort of extensive time spans in the music. And maybe I'll just leave it at that, and we'll play just a little hint of this for you, and then see what your response is to that. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a little sense of the sound. So that piece also is very different when we have drums and the other musicians kind of coming together to build a groove. I know that's just a little tidbit, but what did anyone hear? Yeah, so yeah, just with that little tease, yeah, you can start to hear that the music is based on repeating rhythmic patterns. And there's a similar way in which the instrumentalists, I think, are really focused when we play this music on a kind of rhythmic integrity. And that ends up being a really important part of how the music communicates. So yeah, there is that similarity. Any other responses? That's okay. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the comment is that the music has a little something in common. Again, just this little chunk of music, something in common with the music of Steve Reich. And yeah, I think that sound is there. And the rhythmic patterns sort of sit on top of each other and they shift. And in fact, this particular module has one persistent sort of interplay of rhythms that's constantly shifting between a number of different spots in the ensemble. It's happening between the pianist's two different hands. So sometimes the pianist will have a group of 4, sometimes a group of 3 in one or the other hand. This is also something that you hear in the bass parts, which Ash was playing. But the arrangement of that will sometimes go out of sync with what the piano has. And then the drum pattern is yet another version of that. And so there's this kind of piling of pattern on top of pattern to create a kind of a dense web. And what ends up happening is that often you have this very intentional sense of every 16th note being filled in somewhere. In other words, every sort of even subdivision of the beat has its own articulation. And that's for me, when I'm playing music like this, that's the element that starts to feel like a kind of a kinship with what workers' unions say demands of you, which is this kind of intense world of focus, because you need to sort of jump on those articulated 16th notes in a very intentional, very focused way, just sort of maintaining a sense of internal kind of rhythmic integrity, and kind of drive the music along, again, in a way such that your part is utterly essential to the success of the music as a whole, rather than sort of saying, well, I live in this ensemble, I'm going to kind of sit on top of the drums and groove a little bit. It's like everybody sort of creates this groove together. So that's a link between these pieces. Ash actually performed this piece a little over a year ago. We played this music as a part of a first-year seminar that we offered last fall, and in that seminar we also did In C, which is a piece I mentioned a little earlier, and then we did a couple of these modules. So I'm curious, Ash, I don't know, what was your experience like playing these pieces, learning this music?
Yeah, it's honestly a lot of fun to play just because of the nature of the rhythms, and I think it grooves really nicely. And like being a cellist, I don't get a lot of opportunities to like play this kind of genre, or it's like rare, but one of my favorite kind of genres to play. And yeah, it's just really, I don't know. The bass line is very like, it's just so fun to play for me, and like the groove for it is just nice. And I think the harmonies are really interesting too. And yeah, I just think it's really nice.
Yeah, again, there's a component of this piece that is so so inviting because you have these parts that can interchange, yeah, we're really excited to be able to present this for you on Saturday. We've got a ensemble that I think has put together a really cohesive groove out of it. So, any final comments? Any other observations? Mm. Yeah, Rose makes a great comment that I'm gonna try and repeat for our live streamed audience. So let me see if I get this right. But the comment is that in some ways the music has a kind of almost oppositional or inverted kind of set of components that feel very together and that feel like they're sort of rubbing against each other or dissonant or apart. So the Andriessen has kind of rhythmic unison, but the world of harmony and pitch that you hear is really dissonant and sort of rough. And here, the harmonic worlds are very clear, and there's a couple of different harmonic universes that the music moves through as it unfolds for about 10 or 12 minutes or so. And yeah, and so, yeah, but rhythmically, there's constantly that sense of the different lines sort of pushing against each other. Yeah, that's a great comment. Yeah, sort of mirrored sort of sets of oppositions. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So, thank you all so much for being here. We are so excited to be able to present this concert for an in-person audience as well as a live stream audience on our webpage, newmusicnewcollege.org. Concert again is 5 p.m. on Saturday, tomorrow. And there's a pre-concert talk at 4:30. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the music that you'll hear. And we invite you all to come and enjoy that. There are still, for those of you out there watching at home, there are still a small number of in-person tickets available, not too many, because we have to limit our crowd size. But if you're a local and you're interested in joining us, there's still space available. Be in touch with us. We'd love to have you. And we look forward to seeing everybody there. Thank you.